Hi guys, Tom Barclay here in Ferencvaros stadium for Tottenham training ahead of their big match tomorrow in the Europa League. You see, just running past me at the moment, along with Mr. Alistair Gold. If you can see him down there, there you are, Ali. There you go. Very happy. Right, just done the press conference with James Maddison and Ange Postecoglou. As I said before, when it comes to Europa League or European matches, we often get a player as well, which is nice because it's normally just Ange. And Maddison, an interesting one, because I don't know if that hints at him starting this game, because I wouldn't have thought he would be, but we'll have to see. But he had lots of interesting points to make in quite a brief 10 minutes, of which half of it was translated. Top of the shop was England rather than Spurs, to be honest, because on Thursday is the England squad announcement. He did obviously make Illy Carsley's first squad in September against Ireland and Finland, but he's playing very, very well, as we all know from his performance at Man United and against Brentford. So you'd think he'd be in with a chance. He said, yes, I want to be in. He feels as fit as he has ever done. He talked about being in, having a summer off, obviously missing out on the Euros, but the benefits of that, like Erling Haaland, people have been talking about the fact that he has had a summer off and has felt like he can hit the ground running, and Maddison feels the same way. Says he feels alive on the pitch at the moment, which was a nice quote. And he talks about proving doubters wrong and how much that fuels him after the summer, and a number of other subjects as well. He talked about Mikey more, just like Son last week. He was asked about Mikey, who's, as everyone knows from a Tottenham perspective, is one of the most exciting players to come through the academy in many, many years. And like Sonny, he was waxing lyrical about Moore's talents. One of the interesting things that he mentioned was just how physically impressive he is already. He's basically a man, despite only recently turning 17, and obviously we'll get even more impressive from that. He talked about how technically he's got bags of ability, but also how much respect he shows the senior pros. He didn't come in with that in any arrogance, but just happily showing his ability, which seems to show how he's really settled in well with the first team squad. Ange Postecoglou, and Maddison can sort of stop talking about what an exciting prospect he is without trying to put too much pressure on him. Kind of reiterating what Sonny said last week as well on Mikey Moore, who you've got to think will be hoping for his first start or be in line to come off the bench again in this game. He was also asked about Dejan Kulusevski, because Kulusevski's obviously moved into the middle in recent games, and it feels like they've really formed an excellent combination with Bentancur behind. He sort of pushed back on the idea of Kulusevski sort of sharing the creative workload, but just talked about what a top player, top mentality he's got, and said he was the fittest geezer he's ever seen, which I think we could see, in spades at Old Trafford when he had such a good performance. And then finally he was asked about Brennan Johnson, who's a good friend of his. It's been a big talking point, hasn't it? Johnson coming off social media as a result of fan abuse, but his form since then, 4 goals in 4 games, it couldn't have been any better. Maddison said that that whole situation with social media and Johnson coming off it is a bit overblown. He's the kind of person who probably would just turn it off for a few weeks. It's not just like it had to be like one significant moment, but he was also saying he's not exactly going to encourage him to get back on it, given how good his form has been. And he was also asked by my esteemed colleague Ali about that picture that he posted the other day of R9 Ronaldo and Brennan Johnson's face sort of melded together to sort of comically underline just what a hot streak he's on at the moment. And he said, obviously it was a bit of tongue in cheek, but he reiterated how close they are and what a great player he thinks Johnson is. Moving on to Ange's comments from this particular press conference, like I said, Maddison sort of dominated proceedings, but first of all, from team news point of view, a few players left at home. Radu Dragusin, for obvious reasons, he's suspended, so it just didn't make any sense to bring him here. Destiny Udogie is out of the game. He said it wasn't something majorly significant, but I think it's a quad injury, so one to watch ahead of Brighton. And then Sonny has been left to continue his rehab back in London, so it's no real indication at this point whether he will definitely be fit for Brighton, but obviously he came off in the last Europa League game against Karabag with tiredness in his hamstring. Obviously missed the win at Old Trafford, and he's missing out here as well, so they're without the captain. Andrew was asked unsurprisingly as well, by myself, about Dominic Solanke and Maddison's England chances with the squad being announced tomorrow. With Solanke, regarding him being called up, and he's obviously an former Australia manager, an international manager, so he's not going to be the kind of person who starts telling other international managers what they should do from a selection point of view. But he did talk about Solanke's very impressive start, how he had a bit of a false start because of that injury, but how he's come back firing in the last few games and looked really, really promising, and sort of justifying exactly why Tottenham signed him in the first place, why Ange felt like he'd be such a good fit for the kind of profile striker they were after, and also talking about the rigours of the particular role the centre forward in his team has to have or has to deal with, and how he feels Solanke's going to fit with that. I sort of pushed him a bit further about England, and like I said, he said he wasn't going to. He gets enough stick from his own selections that he's not going to start commenting on someone else's. But he says, physically he's ready if he is called upon for England, which will be fascinating to see if either of them are in. I have a sneaky suspicion that Solanke's got a good chance of being in this squad. Maddison, I don't know. He's playing so well, but there's just so much competition in those roles, and it sort of depends where Carsley sort of sees him. If he sees him as a slightly more deeper midfielder, that might actually help his chances, given the fact that he's got absolute, embarrassment of riches in the number 10 position. Bellingham will be back, Foden will be back, Cole Palmer will be fit again, and then Grealish played there very well the other day, and last month, and then there's Morgan Gibbs-White who came into it. There are other players too, so he's got a lot of competition there. So that'll be intriguing to see how he gets on. I mean, Carsley's actually someone who knows Maddison pretty well because they worked together when Maddison was a youth player at Coventry, when Carsley had his first managerial job, albeit on an interim basis at Coventry, and also he was assistant to Eddie Boothroyd when Maddison was in the under-21s. Actually went to the Euros, one of the disappointing Euros, as opposed to the one that Carsley won with the under-21s a year ago. So he's someone he'll know well. Whether that holds any water and whether he picks him or not, or if it's just a matter of if he does miss out, just the fact that there's just so much competition remains to be seen. But they're both playing well enough that they'd fully justify a call-up if they did get one. There's a few youngsters here again in the Tottenham squads, the likes of Lancashire and Moore and a few others who will be hoping for minutes. Lancashire, you think, particularly with Richarlison injured and the workload on the burden on Solanke, particularly with Son being injured, you'd think if it was going well in this stadium tomorrow that they have a good chance of him playing off the bench. So, and obviously Moore as well. With no Son and the fact that Johnson's played so much recently, could he have a chance of getting that start? We'll see. Sergio Reguilón is also here. It does seem more to make up the numbers in training rather than playing too much, even though Udogie is out. That was another thing he was asked about. He was also asked about Ferenc Puskás and his relationship with him, which I obviously did a video on that the other day, about his sort of surprising connection, I suppose, with the Hungarian football icon of global football was Ferenc Puskás. The pair worked together at South Melbourne Hellas back in the late 80s, early 90s, when the young Postecoglou was the captain and Puskás was the manager. But it wasn't just that. Postecoglou was his unofficial interpreter and unofficial chauffeur, and he learned so much. And he just paid tribute to him again, and said he almost feels like, I forget what the exact quote was, but essentially he's still sort of pinching himself that he had such an amazing experience with a football icon in Australia. It just seems so unlikely to happen that he is still very, very still feels very, very lucky to have experienced that. And it's, as I said in that video, it has influenced him quite a lot. So some nice words on Ferenc Puskás back in his hometown of Budapest. And then just finally, we talked about the other manager, Pascal Jansen, who himself was born in London, despite being a Dutchman. And Jansen talked about how when he grew up, Tottenham were one of the teams he followed, mainly because they played in white, apparently. But Jansen and Postecoglou actually faced off against each other a couple of years ago when Janssen was in charge of Alkmaar, who he was in charge of for 4 years before taking over Ferencvaros earlier this year, and Postecoglou was manager of Celtic. So Postecoglou talks about how well he set the team up and what a competitive game it was. So you'd think it'd be unlikely to have a similar kind of match-up tomorrow, just because of the strength and depth of Spurs versus Ferencvaros. I mean, Ferencvaros have won every single game so far in the league, top of their Hungarian league. But in Europe, this is, I think, their 7th game, because they were in the Champions League qualifiers, went knocked out of that, and then went into the Europa League qualifiers, just about got through that. But they haven't really been any great shakes in this competition so far. Tottenham, obviously, one of the favourites, the way they're playing. So you'd think, even with sort of a bit of rotation from Spurs' point of view, they would be heavy favourites for a convincing win, just like the likes of Man City last night in the Champions League. So yeah, just finally onto the team selection. I mean, Ange showed in the last game against Karabakh that he wasn't going to rotate quite as much as he did against Coventry in the League Cup. The better they do in this competition early doors, it does feel like it's quite likely that that might still be that further on in this league phase that he then could experiment a bit more. But I would not be surprised if he went for a similar team as the one that he picked last time out at Karabakh. We're talking Vicario in goal, probably Gray at right back, Romero and Van der Ven because Dragosin's suspended, Davis probably coming in at left back, Bissouma, I'd still think Sarr and Bergvall, but the fact that Maddison was picked for the press conference makes me wonder if maybe he might play. Maybe he might even play further forward, because to alleviate the sort of workload on Johnson. But if not, then you'd think Johnson, Solanke, Werner from the off, and it's kind of where the Maddison comes in. But there are options, obviously, perhaps even a chance for Mikey more. We'll wait to see.